I will preach this all day long. The Universal monster movies need to go back to horror.
Lo and behold, the prodigal son returns. Gaze into the abyss.
Elizabeth Moss in 2020 made The Invisible Man, or at least starred in this movie. The Invisible Man, the original, was one of the great Universal movies, and I'd like to speak to you a little bit about your opinion on remakes and reimaginings and stuff. But The Invisible Man, for me, wasn't just a good horror movie. It was an excellent horror movie because it did a good job of updating the original movie, but it also honored it and paid homage to it in its own way. What was your take on The Invisible Man, the remake at least?
Yeah, I was definitely skeptical going
Yeah.
in because it's definitely a big. The Invisible Man's in my top three Universal monster characters. I love that original James Whale film, and even the sequels are actually pretty good as
Yeah.
well. Um, but going into it and coming out of the theater, I was pleasantly surprised because it did one thing that it needed for me to be a success, was be a horror movie, and I think B, recontextualize the character. So I think the best part of it is that it didn't feel the need to just remake the original film shot for shot or story for story. It takes the idea of the Invisible Man and gives them a similar like presence to the original, but gives them a different meaning as far as the subtext and what's going on in the film. So I was really surprised when I came out of that movie liking it a heck of a lot, because I do think a lot of the other Universal Monster remakes got caught up in, we got to tell the same story in the same period and the same.
Mm.
It's like it feels like we're limited in a box, and at that point, it's like, well, I can go watch these movies on Blu-ray now, the
Mm.
originals. It's like I don't necessarily need a new retelling of these stories. So if you can make it a little different, like The Invisible Man did, and recontextualize the story, I think that's what the true strength of that film was. Uh, this unseen threat of that looms over, I mean, men, women. It's just like a toxic relationship. What is that? It affects you not even when they're there, when you can't see them. It's still something that looms greatly on a person, and I think it was a fabulous film.
Yeah, I'm glad that you think that, and it's interesting what you say that it still managed to stay a horror movie. I'm surprised. It felt like it felt like of the success of that movie, people would that they would go out and start making more of these movies. There was a lot of talk about that, and there's been the Dark Universe rumors and stuff. I would say that the Mummy movies were not that, just not my cup of tea. I wasn't into those movies. I don't think they were really horror movies in the same way that Karloff's movie was a horror movie. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there by going, The Invisible Man was a horror movie. And I think that's what you need to honor if you're going to go back and remake or reimagine these movies. Got to remember, this is a horror movie and it needs to be that. I think the 2010 Wolfman, I mean, I'm still not sure what to make of that movie. There's parts of it that I absolutely love, and there are parts of it that sort of scratch my head at. What did you think of that one?
I liked it a little bit, but it's still, again, that's one of the movies where it's like you're playing around with it like not enough maybe to have me say, well, I could just put on the original
Yeah.
Wolfman. But I do love the sets, the period piece of it all. Rick Baker's makeup is absolutely fantastic. What they
Yeah.
do show of it, I mean, I know that there's some CGI, more CGI than he wanted in that, but I at the end of the day, it's a little bit middle of the road for me. I think it after The Invisible Man, it's probably my next favorite. I'm not saying that's not saying like a whole lot, but I even like the first Mummy Brendan Fraser movie because I think it plays more to the Karras movies that would come
Yeah,
after Karloff's version, which are a little bit more fun, but like you
yeah,
said, it's not exactly this like horror. It's not really like scary.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the key is like whether it's the Wolfman or the Invisible Man or the Mummy, it's like go back to horror. Like these aren't action movies. These like and I'm not saying to like that you can't do these things or like try something. I do think the formula would work a lot better if we were approaching these characters with the horror background instead of trying to make them something that they weren't intended for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three key factors about the Universal monster movies, in fact, all of the movies out of the golden age of horror, it's got to be horror. It's got to be atmospheric. I mean, those movies were just so rich in atmosphere, and those characters need to be rich. There needs to be an element of tragedy to them. I think those were the three elements that work for those movies, and those are the elements that you need to bring back if you are going to remake them. So I mean, that's probably oversimplifying the criteria some, but I think that's kind of what you gotta kind of aim for, and a lot of the movies probably some of those tried to go too big. But in terms of, I just want to get back to the remake and the reimagining. It's like when you go to the cinema these days, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a remake, you're seeing a reimagining, you're seeing something of that nature. And Martin Scorsese has famously hit the headlines again, criticizing superhero movies. I don't think he's necessarily criticizing superhero movies per se. I just think that what he's really saying there is we want to go to the cinema and get a superhero movie, but we also want to get the edgy movies. We want to get the little horror movies. We don't just want big remakes. Having said that, though, do you have an opinion in terms of remakes have their place, or do you think that we should just go back and leave the Universal monster movies and appreciate them for what they are?
So a little bit of both. We absolutely need to go back, watch the movies, appreciate the classics. Because many of them obviously are still stand the test of time. But I want remakes. I do think these characters need to be, because a lot of people became fans of Universal Monsters from The Mummy 1999, whether you like that movie or not, or even a movie that I really didn't like, The Mummy 2017. It's like some people, that was their gateway into the Universal Monsters universe. Like, so that movie may have had someone go back and watch the 1932 original, and then they probably watched every other Boris Karloff movie. So I do think that remakes have their place because they can bring new people back to these older films. Well, are we going to be making movies like The Invisible Man? Or are we going to be making movies like, The Mummy 2017? It's like, I mean, everyone has their own taste, and not to bash on anything, but again, I am I will preach this all day long. The Universal monster movies need to go back to horror. Horror is where they came from, and that's where they need to kind of stay in, like as far as like telling these compelling stories.
Right.
It worked for about 100 years now, so it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but just recontextualize these characters, but through a horror lens. I think that's the most important part.